Hi, this is the video for Module 13, and there's only one more module after this, module of classwork, coursework anyway, and then there will also be another module called the final module, of course, but we're almost there, almost to the end. So for Module 13, the first thing you're going to do is read Spring Chapter 14. Now, Spring Chapter 14, I think I say this about every chapter, is very interesting because, of course, I'm a history geek. But this one in particular is truly interesting, especially for those of us who are venturing actually into the field of education today, either as an SLP or as an actual just classroom teacher or in administration or counseling in any way, because Chapter 14 deals with three, sort of the trifecta of legislative acts that are very important. And each one, all three of them essentially speak to, allowing more equality of opportunity to different kinds of students. So it really begins with, the Civil Rights Act of 1965, and of course, many decades of work led up to that act, but it actually happened in 1965. And although Brown v. Board occurred in 1954 and was supposed to be carried out with all deliberate speed, it took until this act was actually implemented for many schools to be forced to actually have to begin the desegregation process. And the way that they did this was naturally through withholding funds, through money, because nothing speaks to the American, what do you call it, institutions like, unfortunately, money. So many schools, the federal government was essentially allowed through one of the titles, I think it was Title IV of the Civil Rights Act, was allowed the federal government to sue, to bring up lawsuits against any districts that did not desegregate. So they upheld then with, I think it was Title VI or maybe Title V, I can't remember, but another one of the titles then allowed the federal withholding of funds based on discrimination. So if discrimination was occurring in the schools, then they could federally withhold funds. So once you start putting your money where your mouth is, so to speak, many districts were forced to desegregate. And of course, then you see some side effects of that, and that would be a lot of private schools, a lot of private academies in the South pop up because many of those academies are not this way now, but their origins in many cases were to keep their, for many whites, to keep their kids from not having to go to school with blacks. So it's an unfortunate history of some of the what they called segregation academies in the literature. But anyway, so the Civil Rights Act of 1964, did I say 1965? It was of 1964. The Immigration Act of 1965 opened the doors again to the United States, to many areas of the world, Asia, Latin America, Eastern Europe, and allowed many opportunities for immigration that were previously closed as a result of the Immigration Act of like 1925, I want to say. So you had a period of time where essentially many groups of people were not represented there were these quotas, based on percentages of how much population was actually in the United States to begin with, and it was this sort of complicated device that would actually keep many people from Asia, let's say, from Southeast Asia, from Latin America, and so forth, keeping them out of the United States. So the doors sort of open up in 1965 as a result of that legislation. So again, you're opening up the possibilities now for the school system to educate a wider population of people. And that also happened again with the desegregation of schools as a result of the Civil Rights Act. And then fast forward about 10 more years, and you will see the IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disability in Education Act. And that act, did I say 1975? Yeah, 1975. That act, it set the standard for things that we take sort of for granted today, things such as the IEP, the Individualized Education Plan, for students with special needs. It also put into effect what was called the LRE, the Least Restrictive Environment, for a particular student and for even a particular subject. Perhaps they needed to be in one environment for math, but they could be in another environment for English, or perhaps they had to be self-contained for most of their classes, but they could go to PE or electives with their cohort. So, the IDEA was very, very important as well, because it basically demanded that states, that districts offer opportunities to all students, and despite disability or impairment. So those are three very, very important pieces of legislation that essentially, again, you've kind of seen this over the years of education in the United States. It's sort of an ever-widening circle of who has access to education. And now I think we're not finished. Everybody has access to education. However, what is the equalness, the equality of that education? I think that's what we're really dealing with now, because as I showed in that PowerPoint that you're going to view for Chapter 14, desegregation began to work in the 70s, and schools were far more desegregated in the 70s than they are now. And that's just resegregation has happened. And some of it is de facto. Some of it is just that's where people choose to live. People choose to self-segregate a lot of the times. Some people don't have the resources to move to the richer neighborhoods where their kids can get a better education either. So, and we've talked a lot about poverty already, and all the issues that have to do with that, and how people of color are more represented in the population of poverty. So another important piece of legislation, since we're done with the Ravitch book, a really important piece of legislation that I think most people don't realize happened in 1982, and that is Plyler v. Doe. And that was a court case originated in Texas. Obviously California, Arizona, Nevada, these are going to be states, New Mexico, and Texas. All these border states obviously have probably a bigger stake in undocumented immigrants, what we call illegal aliens or undocumented immigrants. Those states have a bigger stake in how the federal government recognizes undocumented immigrants, because in this particular case, Texas tried to withhold funds to districts that served illegal aliens. Okay, so this court case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and in a bare majority, it was decided that you have to educate these children. So children of so-called illegal aliens or undocumented immigrants, you have to allow them to have an education, and you cannot withhold funds based on immigration status. Now, that I give you a PowerPoint for that, but please read the decisions, because the little article, it's not a very long article. The article that I gave you to read for this is an introduction of what was going on at the time and what the legislation, how it came about. But then it also gives you the majority opinion by Brennan, who was, I believe, Chief Justice at the time, Chief Justice at the time, and then by Berger, who offered the dissenting opinion. And you really have to read it, because there are very interesting points to both sides of this case. So no matter what you may think going into this about whether or not you feel that children of undocumented immigrants deserve an education or not, after reading this, you may change your mind one way or the other, or at least you'll be more educated about what the issues involved are. And of course, this hinged on, again, the 14th Amendment and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. And the wording, it says no person in its jurisdiction can be denied equal protection under the law. Not, citizen. It doesn't say no citizen shall be denied, it didn't give any indication of that. It's a person within the jurisdiction. And if an undocumented immigrant breaks the law, let's say, they are held to going to jail. They have to they have to be represented by the law, I guess you would say, if they do something negative. So, it's a real touchy subject for a lot of people, especially today. I mean, it's still a very hot topic, even since 1982, which I know seems like a long time ago, but it really wasn't that long ago. But anyway, you need to read it, and you need to decide where you fall. What do you think about it? It's hard to say. Would this particular case pass today? In today's environment, it's really hard to say. I have a feeling it might not. But regardless, as teachers, as educators, as people in the school system, you are going to be faced with more issues because of this, because undocumented immigrants or people who are in the United States that may not have their first language, their native language is not English, creates more educational issues. There's no way to get around that. And I'm not saying we shouldn't educate, children in any way, shape, or form. But if you're talking about educating children whose native language is not English, there's no way to get around the problem that creates more problems. So how do you address these? How do you deal with these? There's bilingual education, there's multicultural education, and all of these, there's different ways to approach this particular problem. And it's going to get even bigger because, we're seeing the population of the United States change. And in the next 50 years, it's projected to be, to change even more. So anyway, it's important to understand this if you're going to be an educator. So read Plyler v. Doe. All right. And then you're going to have, you're going to respond to the discussion prompt. And for this discussion prompt, what you're going to do is you're going to upload your presentation that you created from your paper. And you're also going to upload the one-page handout. The one-page handout should be, basically, you should have on the front page, it should be a summary of your main points. And then on the back page, it should be your sources, okay, your 10 sources. And that way, this can be sort of just a takeaway for each person. And people can decide which ones they want to print or upload or whatever. So let's say, you're, a second-year student and you want to save a couple of these for good sources to use in the future. Perhaps, there's a part of multicultural education that you want to investigate for another class in the future. Well, you'd have a handy little cheat sheet, so to speak, not really, but you know what I'm saying, of where you could look at the sources and the presentation points that this other person already made. So it's just kind of a nice way for you to sort of begin to build sort of a list of resources, I suppose. Okay, and then you're going to respond. You're going to view some of your colleagues, some of your classmates' presentations, and then you're going to make comments on at least 2 of those. So that's what the discussion prompt is about this time around. I did assign a journal for this module, but I've decided to make it optional. If you have answered, there's been 6 other journals. This is the 7th. If you have answered all 6, you're happy with your grade overall for those journals, then and if you don't know how to calculate that, you can email me and I'll help you. But this one is basically optional. You will not be penalized if you don't do journal number 7. However, if you're someone who, for whatever reason, missed answering some of the journal responses over the course of the semester, this will only help bring your grade up. Okay? So if you have any questions about that, just email me. But again, Journal 7 is optional. It can basically only help your grade. And then, let's see, your educational issue presentation is due by midnight next Sunday with the one-page handout. And so, yes, you're going to be turning it into more than one place. You're going to be turning it into the Dropbox to me, the 2 things, the presentation and the one-page handout. But then you're also, like I said before with the discussion prompt, you're going to be uploading it there so that your classmates can also view those things. Okay? Their opinions will have no indication on your grade, though, just so maybe that makes you feel better. I don't know. All right, so I guess that's it for Module 13. One more module to go, and then the final. So I guess I will see you in Module 14.